Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 28 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. My name is Lori Beth, and for now, because I am in Bali, I am pre-recording these interviews. So, yeah, and you can stay tuned for hopefully in the future they will be completely live again. So this is a show that I interview different thought leaders, coaches, therapists, and healers in the realm of transformation. And in this show, what we are talking about is more of, it's not a transformation or healing to get what you want. It's more about what happens when we really engage with ourselves, with the world, with a transformational process. How does that give us more of ourselves and more intimacy with life, and just a deeper sense of being human? So today I am here with Tal Arnan, and hopefully I just said your last name right. Is that right? Can you hear me? Ooh.
You just went a little kind of like
Okay.
out of the.
Hopefully, wow, we're having connectivity issues.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just asking if I pronounced your last name right.
Oh, Tal Rachleff. Yeah.
Oh, Rachleff.
Yeah.
Nice.
Rachleff. Yeah. It's a weird last name. So my
I
first
said,
name's weird too, but my last name is definitely hard.
okay, I totally said the wrong last name. Anyway, and I've known Tal for years.
Yeah. I don't know it's supposed to be pronounced, so it's okay.
So I'm hoping that
I am unoffended.
You're unoffended. Good. So let me know if the connection isn't good, because that's probably on my end.
Yeah.
How's it going right now?
It seems okay.
Okay.
I don't see anything usually there's like the bars at the bottom that show if it's bad, but I'm not seeing that right now. So yeah, you have like yellow, which should be okay. Yellow is usually okay.
Well, we'll try.
I'm actually going to switch over to a different network myself, so give me 1 sec.
Which I could also do if we have an issue.
Let's see. All right, let's see what happens now. Okay, now you're red, so we'll see.
Okay, we're
right.
hoping this goes well. We'll keep going, and then just
okay. Do you want to like start the recording again, or just keep going? And
I think we should keep going. Yeah, and see.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So I'd love to introduce Tal, which even though I said your last name completely wrong first time. So Tal is a certified relationship and conscious uncoupling coach, and also an embodiment and relationship expert. And I didn't say what the title of this episode is, but it's conscious coupling. So actually what we're going to be talking about is the process that Tal leads people through of conscious uncoupling, which is a process that allows people to, separate from romantic relationship. Is it romantic? Is it only romantic relationship, or all kinds of relationships?
I mean, it could be all kinds of relationships, actually. Yeah, any relationship.
Yeah, and so so he's going to be describing some of that process. But in his work doing this conscious uncoupling work, he's gotten really excited and inspired about helping people to consciously couple, because in our culture we tend to there tends to be more of an emphasis on like, oh, we're in the honeymoon stage, and oh, I'm entering this beautiful relationship and everything's all good, and that we miss something in that. And that actually obviously creates a lot of relationships that don't work, or where then people are coming to Tal to consciously uncouple. So I'm really excited about this topic, and I know that Tal will get more into it as we speak about it, but one of the things that I know one of your interests is really helping people kind of even over the age of 30. And in part because we tend to, I think people in relationships in their, teens and 20s, it's like it's new and you haven't had a lot of relationships. And then there's something different that happens as you get older and you've had relationships, that haven't worked out. You've had relationships maybe that were, you maybe personally weren't as kind of in your own boundaries, you weren't as discerning. So maybe were in a relationship that really didn't, that, was really challenging or even harmful. And so how do we then take those experiences and be able to enter into a new kind of, like in our next relationships, be able to process that and then make better choices, and also be in that kind of communication and awareness with the person that we are coupling with.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Well, I mean, it seems based on what I've said, is there, something that's coming up for you as a good place to start? I mean, definitely in describing,
I mean, yeah. Sorry, you just cut out. I just missed what you said.
You can go ahead. Oh, saying the connection's unstable.
Okay.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Let me see if I change.
Yeah, you're frozen.
Let me see if I change. Hold on. Is this better?
So far.
Okay, let's try it. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, the thing that was just coming to mind as you were speaking was a client I was speaking with the other day who was concerned about talking to prospective future people that she's dating about her past relationship, and getting just how real this, like, especially as you said, as people get older and have had more relationship history, especially when it's not been so beautifully navigated, like maybe there was some real challenge, some dysfunction, some traumatic experiences, the sense for one of the people that they stayed in something way longer than they should have, as an example that I often hear, like I saw the red flags, and kind of kept thinking I could change things or something. And this particular person was saying, is it really a good idea for me to share about this with someone in the future? Because then I'm worried they'll use it against me because they'll know that I'm the quote unquote that kind of person. And I think, and this is somebody that I've just started to talk to. And when I say client, I'm actually speaking to someone I was just talking to as a not yet a client, but just like in the conversation about this topic. And it definitely, touched something in me, that fear of being vulnerable, of being open about your own experience in the past. And the paradox is, I think for most people who are watching this, who are interested in genuine transformation, not to kind of get to some place outside of where they are now, but to actually inhabit their own experience in the way that, if they want anything, it's they want to inhabit their moment-to-moment reality in their highest alignment, like in what's true for you. Like I can't, like as a coach or as a therapist, it's like we help people discover their own truth, assuming they're leaning towards being in a healthy way with themselves and others. So it's like I can't tell you how to do that, but the paradox is we both want to protect ourselves from revealing too much too soon, and that's something we can get into a little bit around the journey and the timing of things. But also ultimately, we all want to feel that we can be very revealing with our partners, and not hide anything and not hold back. So if we have something in our relationship history that we feel is a sort of like a dark secret that you'd feel vulnerable to share, that in and of itself is to me even though it's dark, it's like a bright light shining on the thing that you may want to strongly consider working through and getting some support around, whether that's with
Mm-hmm.
a coach or a therapist or going to workshops or using books, depending on your level of self-efficacy, to completely rewrite that story, or else you're just going to go into this next thing with something you're carrying that you want to keep hidden. That's generally not a great strategy to create a successful, vulnerable, intimate relationship.
Well, it's an interesting example to me because it seems like there's a distinction between um, like it seems pretty understandable to me that somebody might have a fear of sharing their past relationship and being vulnerable. And that seems potentially different than whether you've worked through it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Um, but there's a difference, I think, between the fear of sharing something and the kind of inner knowing or discernment that now is not the right time.
Mm.
It's like the difference between like fearing having sex with somebody versus being like, I'm choosing not to open that far with you right now because that doesn't feel aligned for me. I'm not scared of it.
Mm.
I don't feel like that could happen in due time. So that is an important distinction though, around what our emotion is around the thing we might share.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of curious how you would suggest people navigate that. Another thought I'm having is that
Mm-hmm.
I think and I'm sure we've all experienced this, but I think it really matters. Like if I'm on a date with somebody and I ask them about their um, past relationships or their relationship with their parents, and they respond in a way that's not taking very much responsibility, that's a
Mm-hmm.
red flag to me. Versus
Totally.
somebody who's communicating in such a way in which it's obvious that yes, they might have had challenging past relationships, but they've done the work or they're in the process of doing the work, and they're much more in a place of accountability, and and for me, and I'm sure you have this too, it lines up. It's more of an intuitive. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's the words, but it's also like, oh, that, like, it's either like, oh, that feels good in my system, or that doesn't. So I'm bringing
Right.
that up mostly because this is the kind of thing I'm guessing that you're um,
Yeah.
working with people when you're wanting to support them to consciously couple. And I'm curious how you would address that.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot in what you said, and one thing that I wanted to share that we spoke about before we started recording is this idea of conscious coupling. I would invite people to hold it as a journey that can really happen within yourself, of what you're choosing to bond with in a way, like what you're choosing. It's like yoga is yoking, and
Mm.
union, but like with what are you coupling with in your own consciousness before you even think about coupling with another human being, and really getting to know yourself and know your light and your shadow, to know your own stories, and hold them in a way that is empowering for you, that even if there are aspects of your past that may have been dark at the time and very difficult, and that you maybe you know cried out to God, like, how is this happening to me when I'm a kind, good-hearted person, and yet I find myself in something really challenging that I've on some level chosen, right? Whether that's abusive or neglectful or just dramatic and unpleasant, at whatever level. Um, that inquiry, I believe, will lead us to kind of choose to both consciously uncouple from certain patterns and choose to couple with others. And so when I talk to my clients that are
Mm.
in the uncoupling phase, I have to remind them repeatedly that, as much as in the popular culture, the understanding of conscious uncoupling is you're uncoupling from another person, the reality is that on any level, it's something that's happening internally.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people come to me after marriages of decades where like their marriage was pretty flat. like there wasn't really much coupling in that sense happening anyway. You know, they weren't close and intimate with their partners. So are they really still a couple? I mean, they're cohabitating. But when they do the conscious uncoupling work, it's not necessarily about emotionally distancing themselves from that person, right? In this example, it's really about doing their own inner work to learn what had them stay in something that was so unsatisfying for them, you know, and just choose to kind of like stick it out or keep hoping it would get better. And that's an internal process, right? So it's not necessarily, and it, in general, it's really never about the other person. Like even if you have an addictive personality and you're like kind of codependent with someone, that's your own stuff. It's not really about the other person, right? So all that to say is that conscious coupling, I would invite people to see that as much of a process of self-awareness and self-reflection and self-transformation, as we spoke about in the beginning, as anything involving some other person that's going to like do that with you. You know, it's almost like that's a process you're always going to be doing, whether you're in a relationship or not. You know, it's like we're always choosing what to hold as close in, you know.
Beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it makes me think that and your work is really about, it's both the internal and the external, because people, I imagine, like whether it's conscious coupling or conscious uncoupling, people are coming to you to both do that kind of internal work. I mean, they might not know that actually always from the beginning. I don't know, but to do that work so that, I mean, to do that work, it's a internal process so that the external there can be different outcomes that can almost probably, I'm also almost guessing that they can happen like almost on their own, because once the internal is kind of in a different place, like for example, with the conscious coupling, a single person could then attract somebody completely different in a completely different way. But also, and then in the example of the conscious uncoupling, I mean, couples are coming to you, right, to have this process, but then it's also, it's both, it does seem like it is for them as a couple to like actually have more clarity and more love and more compassion and forgiveness, but also to then kind of do that inner work, like you said, to look at, wow, why did I choose to be in 20 years? You know?
Right. And that's a key point about like couples doing this work, which I definitely encourage, you know, couples at every level of health and vitality as they define it, to find outside resources to engage with to enhance their relationship, or to discern if they should continue if they're at that level of like, I don't know if this is working, and they both feel that way. Obviously, that's when a lot of couples do seek help. And but the key point here, and this is why I say it's first of all an inner game, as it always is. You know, that the inner transformation yields the outer results, as you said. You know, I mean, it's like on some level you could say, well, if you transformed your outer world to a certain extent, that would transform us internally, which is true. But there still needs to be some inner work done to create a different external environment. You know, like if you said, okay, put, you know, fresh flowers and plants everywhere and inspiring art, like that's true. But then like, who's doing that? You know, and it needs to be aligned with what's true for you. Otherwise, like, will that really feel, you know, transformative if somebody else came in and just did it for you? You know, which is why, like, as a coach or a therapist, as much as we wish we might be able to do the work for the other person and transform them, we can't. You know, we can only, or at least I'll just speak for myself, I can only keep reminding them that they know what they really want and what feels good to them and what doesn't. And yeah, sometimes I can help to offer some reflection, but ultimately it's not about my agenda or my thoughts about what's conscious or not, in a way. As long as they're aware of what it is they're choosing, I'm like, great, like try that out. See how it works for you, you know?
So it sounds like what you're saying is that, and this is like another dimension of the whole topic, which I love, is that you're really helping people to get in touch with what's true for them, and then so that the conscious part is like can you be mindful? Can you be aware of what you're doing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even if somebody chooses something that, like, it's like maybe you're working with somebody and then they try something out and they're like, whoa, that did not feel good. That feels out
Mm-hmm.
of alignment. I'm not going to do that again. There's that process with it.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and those moments are really useful, and I, I believe we're always going to quote unquote make mistakes, or have opportunities to learn, or be a little bit wobbly and out of alignment, like, or at least the vast majority of us. Perhaps some people have achieved total, self-awareness, and no longer make mistakes, quote unquote. But I think for almost everyone who's listening to this, like, we know what it's like to have an off day, or to not get enough sleep, or to get triggered and say something you wish you hadn't said, that wasn't really coming from love. Um, and that's okay, but we can learn from that and say, well, instead of blaming reality out there, we can look and say, what's my part in this, right? Not to absolve another person or whatever circumstances for being the way they are,
Mhm.
but to say, like, the only thing I can control is my
Mhm.
response
Mhm.
to whatever stimulus is coming in. And even then, it's pretty challenging,
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
that's the work, right?
I would go as far as I don't, you're like most humans watching this, every human. Like,
Right, every human.
I
I'm
was
just saying, I want to be open to the things I don't know. I haven't met the enlightened master yet that doesn't, like, burn their toast occasionally. As, like, I think Jack Cornfield or somebody said, like even the people that have been on the path for
like, mhm.
30 years still occasionally do things that piss them off or irritate them, that no
Ab-
one else is involved with. They just make their own mistake. It's like,
Absolutely.
so.
Yeah, and this is reminding me of something. I mean, what you said before that I wanted to just highlight, because we were talking before about how there, like, I mentioned, like, the inner transformation then can create that, that shift in people,
Mhm.
and then because people are wanting to have, right, great relation, they're wanting to have a relationship that works, or they're wanting to leave a relationship that's not working. But I also think, and I think you feel this, so I'm just going to say it, you can tell me, but you know even back to the realm of transformation, like, we never know, so we're just doing the work because that's what's in alignment, like, that's what's
Mhm.
right. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, so somebody who's working with you, it's like, sure, you hope that the outcome is that they have this beautiful new relationship because they were in a, unhappy marriage for 20 years or
Right.
whatever. And that may or may not happen, but it seems like I'm guessing for your work, what's most important is the conscious part. Like, is the
Mhm.
you actually are able to, like, you're supporting people to be able to see, wow, I, like, these are my patterns, this is how they're manifesting in the world, this is how they're manifesting in me, this
Mhm.
is how I then, like, don't potentially, like, don't feel good in this situation because I'm not completely listening to myself. So it's more of a process of help supporting your clients to be in alignment with who they are, because if we're in alignment with who we are, I mean, I believe
Right.
it, we naturally feel good, like, even if like the relationship never comes, or you know
Right. And
whatever.
that's, yeah, and that's one of the hardest, maybe one of the hardest principles to fully embrace and embody, is the inherent mystery of what's going to come next.
Mhm.
And um, I think it's really beautiful and important, and I don't. I encourage people to set, bold visions for their future if it's sourced in something deep within them, and not something that they're kind of thinking they should want. But it's like, oh, actually, this is what I really do want.
Mhm.
And so again, it's like the same paradox. This not the same paradox, but another paradox is the one I spoke to earlier, where it's like we both want the thing, and we also have to let go of it happening to be fully present, because there could be something better showing up for you, you know, and or something in the moment that seems a lot worse, but that's going to lead to something better. It's like that Chinese proverb about the
Mhm.
farmer with the son and the wild horses that come and people don't know that story, you could just Google it. But basically, it's like one thing after another happens, and all the villagers tell the farmer, "Oh, this is great for you," and he's like, "We'll see." And then when something bad happens after, they say, "Oh, it's terrible," and he says, "We'll see," but that leads to something good.
Yeah.
And that is how life goes. Like what's good and bad. Certainly there are some things that are like a loss of somebody we love or something that is just inherently heartbreaking and will create a loss that will carry for the rest of our lives. And I don't mean to diminish that, but something can be born from that also that can be
Yeah.
beautiful in its own way. And there's been many spiritual teachers who have lost spouses or children that have written about that process. And I'm not suggesting it's a light process, but it is a letting go of just holding on to, now my life is horrible because something horrible happened. That's something that felt horrible in the moment happened, right? And so the same goes for breakups and divorces, which generally feel horrible. Yet something beautiful can be born from that in the aftermath, and we can carry that beauty into the next, whatever it is we're doing with our lives, whether that's finding a new relationship or co-creating one or not.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. I mean, the other way I would say that is that kind of reality wins. I mean, we can, right? We can do everything in our power. We can, so, and we ultimately don't really know how it will unfold. But I think that's what I'm appreciating about, this conversation and the work that you're doing, that I can really feel it in you, that it's the process of support. Like you're interested in supporting people in getting into alignment with themselves and consciously kind of like looking at each step of what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Does this feel right in my body? Does this feel good for me?
Right.
So it's almost like a deeper spiritual current, because it's like, yes, you're helping people, there's a lot of positive outcomes that can obviously happen. And you're also helping people to be more in alignment and more in touch and more in truth with themselves.
Right. Yeah. And I think if this is an okay time, I'd love to just share a bit about my personal story, because what you just said so much speaks to that, the succession of very painful events that we could say on one level they happened to me, on another level I chose them, another level it was like in my highest good to experience that, or whatever you want to say. But for me it was really a process of getting that I had to undergo a series of really intense kind of trials by fire that were those kinds of experiences. Like, how could this possibly be happening? Like really the depths of despair and the depths of pain and grief at like what I had. And at that point I'd already been on the path a while, so I wasn't like totally clueless. I was like, I chose this, like I co-created this. I was aware. And it forced me to start to look at like, well, where was I out of alignment? Where was I not tuned in? And it's almost embarrassing to admit this, but it took me many, many years to really, and I think I'm still in that process, honestly, but I think I've done the 80-20 of it, where I've gotten like the stuff that really matters. I feel like I've gotten a handle on that. And there's probably some more lingering, like, oh yeah, I could get even into a deeper alignment here with this. But just the level of denial that we can be in when it comes to our love relationships, is profound. And the ways we can, or that I could, and I've seen it in others, I'll speak for myself, that I could have repeated a similar pattern over and again, was very humbling for me. And it's what led me to this work, and that to me is an example of that kind of intense pain and loss leading to something quote unquote good that I never could have imagined. Because when I was younger, I never imagined I'd be like working in the field of love and relationship. When I was in high school and college, that was never a dream of mine. I didn't even really think about that very much. I just kind of thought it was what happened in life. Like I think maybe many of us are raised like you just go out and you find someone and you just get married and have kids, and it's like, it's what you do. And I never realized just how much trauma could play itself out in the field of what started out with, on some level, like a soul level of love, but in the human form was just filled with all kinds of very dysfunctional dynamics.
So were you, sorry, I don't think you said it, but you were in a,
Mm-hmm.
you were in a long relationship that was like that, or it was a relationship that,
I was in more than one relationship that, you know, it wasn't even that long, but it was just I went so deep so fast into a story of what it I thought it was going to be,
got it.
that it then completely, you know,
Mm-hmm.
spun me out like a
Mm-hmm.
tornado. And then I did it again at a slightly lesser
Yeah.
degree of like trauma and
Mm-hmm.
drama, but still pretty similar enough that I was like, oh, I'm doing this again, holy shit. Common denominator is not either of these women, it's me.
Yeah, got
And
it.
that was really humbling, because I thought I am a pretty self-aware person, but I couldn't see certain things, you
Mhm.
know, until they really until I got forced to look at them.
And would you, I mean, in this, would you say that like, because as we talk about conscious coupling, right, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking, and even in our preliminary conversation, what we were talking about is the process of, I mean, you actually said it this way, like a both and, like being able to enter into a relationship and be in that enjoyment and that
Mm-hmm.
curiosity and mystery and sort of, even the honeymoon stage, while still being able to be like, look at, do we have shared values? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what, and that's actually something that would be great for you to talk about, like what you would talk to people about in a conscious coupling process, but and we can get into that in a moment.
Right, right.
But it sounds like that's what you're saying is you went into these relationships without any, just thinking, oh, well, of course, this is how you like,
Right.
this will of course work out and it will be great. And then that not happening and it bringing up a lot of trauma and it bringing like these kind of patterning in you and patterning in her, obviously, or in both of these
Mm-hmm.
women.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
then
they were both women.
what you're sort of saying is the path to get here was like your own experience of, whoa, this, like, we are not doing this well in our culture. Like because we're fed obviously so much about,
Right.
love is and what relationship is. And
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd like to give a shout out to, you know, my teacher in this specific body of work, Catherine Woodward, who wrote Conscious Uncoupling, as well as Calling in the One, who, for me, who normalized for me the experience I was having. Because when this thing happened again, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've done this again. I was just like, it was like a tsunami of shame, you know, washed over me, where I'm like, I am a total, you know, fuck up. How could I have done this again and done this to this woman? Kind of like I'm a perpetrator of some kind, totally unwittingly and unconsciously. And she, in just what she shares, just revealed to me just how common this is and how universal it is. And it's sad that that's true.
mm-hmm.
Um, but it helped me to see that my longing and striving and seeking to create these kind of epic love relationships wasn't in and of itself uh, an immature thing, but it was that how I was going about it was in many ways unconscious, you know, and had some immature aspects to it, you know. And so I think when you're speaking to you know, the idea of consciously coupling and enjoying and embracing the sweetness and the aliveness that we feel when we're starting to get intoxicated by another human and their possibility and their potential, is I think that's part of becoming a more spiritually mature human being, is to be able to hold the fullness of the experience. And it's almost like when you meditate and you're going through a lot of emotional stuff, just like in your own space.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way in which we know that it's good to feel our feelings, right? But we don't want to get completely swamped by them. And that's especially obvious if they're kind of quote unquote what people call negative feelings. And then we get like overwhelmed or super anxious or depressed. But I would say the same is true for positive feelings, you know, and yet so if we can hold them like with the witness consciousness of like, wow, I'm feeling a lot of joy right now, and just enjoy it from a different perspective as well,
Mm-hmm.
then we can probably begin to pattern in like, hey, I'm feeling so great right now. I just want to name that, and maybe even speak to the desire to kind of take some space from that kind of experience, so that you can come back to yourself and
Yeah.
realize like, wow, I'm getting flooded with positive emotion. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like this person is the solution to all my problems, but that in and of itself is a warning sign that
Yeah. Yeah.
part of you knows that's not true, right? And you can be like, okay, let me tend to myself here and maybe bring forth a conversation that will help us to get closer on a more sober level. So that's part of what we're going to talk about, is this past relationship stuff. It
Yeah.
can be big.
I really appreciate you bringing that up. I just know the importance of, I think we do talk a lot about kind of like flooding and overwhelm with negative feelings, but actually exactly what you're saying, um, people get flooded with positive feelings all the time, and then they create all kinds of,
Right.
expectations and dysregulation. I mean, it's coming.
Right. Exactly.
It actually reminds me of working with kids, since I've worked with kids, where there would be this
Hmm.
point at which the excitability went actually over into dysregulation, and
Right.
the child would completely flip out. And so it's like, we don't even, to some extent, it's that same process, right? Because if we get so out of what reality is in a
Hmm.
new love relationship, then we're like not even with the person anymore, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
we're not in the present, we're somewhere else. And then that creates a lot of, I mean, it creates a lot of fantasy, it creates a lot of projection. I'm sure there's other things that it
Yeah.
creates.
Right. Totally. I think that's, it's a great analogy that, what we spoke earlier about becoming more, as we get older, we would like to think, and I think most of us want to become more mature. And that doesn't mean boring or unexcited or not passionate,
Mhm.
but it means just holding ourselves a little bit more gravity in a sense. And so we can experience great joy and bliss, but we can hold it in a way where it's not masking
Mhm.
something that needs to be addressed.
Mhm. Yeah,
And so I think an interesting analogy. Oh, you're frozen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Hello?
Um,
Hello?
can you hear me now?
No, I can't hear you. Mm.
Let's try this. How about now?
Hello? Okay, now I can hear you. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so I don't know if anyone else has said this, but I think in our last conversation I mentioned how the thing that I realized about the conversation we were having about how to hold some of the quote unquote hard conversations within
Mhm.
the bubble of bliss that can accompany early love, um, is similar to what a new movement around psychedelic assisted therapy and people who are using MDMA in clinical trials, and um, they're processing a lot of traumatic events in their lives because they can hold it with love. So I think, just like conscious uncoupling, to me, like I'm meeting people when they're generally cracked wide open because they're so heartbroken. It's like they're on a certain kind of grief
Mhm.
medicine that makes them very, and I say this with the best possible intention, but they're very susceptible to transformation because like their defenses are down.
Mhm.
It's like, please help me. And I'm like, great, let me help you find yourself. I'm not here to help you. I'm here to help you just discover your own strength. Um, and I'm not here to help you just like pull you out of something. I'm here to help you be in it. But similarly, when someone's in that heart opened, like it's sort of like heartbreak, but breaking open to love someone so much, quote unquote, in the beginning feels like,
Mhm.
I actually feel like we shouldn't even call it love. I feel like we need other words, and it's maybe not quite infatuation, but it's something else. And that's a great time to do, again, in appropriate timing and as you build trust, to work on some of these issues that you may be aware of, that you're going to want to share with somebody you may want to go deeper with, and not wait until 6 months later. So
Can you, I think actually we're probably going to go about almost like 10 minutes, maybe a little less. I'd
Hmm.
love for you to actually share how you might lead somebody through a conscious coupling process and
Hmm.
the kinds of, the kinds of questions that you might have them inquire
Sure.
into, and what
Yeah.
the process might look like. Because I think, yeah, I think it'd be great for people watching to
Yeah.
get a sense of that.
Sure. Um, that's it's obviously an involved process, I would say, and I don't say that to be, mysterious about it, but just to say that there's a lot of terrain that I believe would be best covered before getting too deep into a partnered relationship. If somebody's out of something and feeling like they want to explore something in the future, I would say like give yourself at least 6 months, maybe a year, depending on the history and the individual. So it depends. But I think the first step would be do the deep inner work to discover who you truly are now. A lot of people may have the same self schema to some extent or like sense of identity that they had, 5 years ago or 10 years, 20, that when they first got into a relationship, they know they're different, but they haven't really taken the time to sit and inquire and contemplate who they are now and write it down and really take the time to discover what's changed, what they're wanting for the future that's different than what they wanted
Mm-hmm.
a year or 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
um, what they believe about themselves and about how they want their life to look.
Mm-hmm.
So when you spoke about sharing values, I think that's an important
Yeah.
step. But there's like sharing a lot of things. And if we haven't thought about these things and contemplated it, we may enter into a relationship thinking we're okay with whatever, let's just say living in a high rise in the city because that's where one of the people lives.
Yeah.
And if you want to be with them, they're kind of like, this is how it's got to be. But then you realize, actually really my heart's longing is uh, a small like farm in the country.
Mm-hmm.
That's my life, and they're like, I'd never want that. So it's like, that could be a hard thing to navigate if you really do love each other on other levels. There could be a lot of, my story at least is that there's thousands, if not millions, of deep soul level connections we can have on this planet at any moment, and not all of them romantic, but where it is this genuine sense of, wow, I just want to spend so much time with you. But that doesn't mean you should be romantic partners,
Yeah.
and sometimes we can get confused if we're attracted to them physically and they seem, you know, interested in us and we have a good rapport, but that could just mean they're just here to teach us something on the path or be a friend or just even a lover, but until we've done the self-inquiry work in many different areas of our life, of your life, my life, what do you really want in each of these areas? Right now I'm doing this process called Lifebook, which is fantastic. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it
Mm-hmm.
basically breaks your life down into 12 areas and says, well, what do you really want in each area? What do you believe? What do you want? How are you going to,
Mm-hmm.
move in that direction? And I think a lot of us don't really give that a lot of thought. And then that's why relationship can get really wonky because neither person is really clear on what direction they're going in.
Mm-hmm. But so I'm guessing that that's kind of like almost I mean, it's an ongoing thing, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
a preliminary stage of really just like in your work of helping people
Mm-hmm.
to begin to contemplate these things. And you probably,
Right.
some people have that knowing more than others do, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah,
um,
of course. Some
but
people are super clear what they want. And yeah.
but I'm really, I mean, I'm inspired by your work and I can sense just your groundedness and the magic that like both groundedness into like the truth and into this kind of also the sense like supporting people in like their inner alignment, but
Mm-hmm.
also that you have a lot of, I'm guessing you have a lot of like really beautiful ways of helping people kind of like sort of helping people through the entire process. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering if you can speak a little bit to kind of how you might work with somebody who came to you. And I know everybody's different,
Mm-hmm.
but my guess, I mean, I'll just say even preliminary is that
Mm-hmm.
you're really going to be like, you really have a capacity to kind of see the different ask the right questions, see the different patterns, and help people along the whole way, whether
Right.
they're single and want to be in a relationship, or just want freedom from old patterns, right? Or
Right.
they start to date and then, oh wow, when I just went out with this person, you know, I noticed that I felt off when they talked about, whatever,
Right.
this thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I'd love for you to, if you can speak a tiny bit to that. Yeah.
Sure. Um, so you're saying like how to hold someone through the process of
Yeah.
navigating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I say that that first phase, in a way, I see the conscious uncoupling work as preparing the one's field in a way for conscious coupling. It's
Mhm.
kind of like we've got to clear. It's not even clearing it out, like getting rid of it, but more just clearing the unhealthy patterns and residue and story, and instead integrating something that really feels aligned and true and good to us, even if it was hard. So I think I already spoke to that. And the next piece would be, as you spoke about, is really encouraging people to take it slow, to have a practice of inner listening with themselves first and foremost, so that when they go out on dates, they can track that inner feeling and listen and not. One of my key I wouldn't say it's instructions because I don't really like to instruct people, but one of my key, philosophies that I invite people to try on is to go as slow as you possibly can and see if there's anything coming up that you want to jump over or sidestep or sweep, push away. Because whether that's just with meeting somebody and going out on a date and it's not getting physical yet, but there's like stuff that can come up, and to just be able to navigate that and speak to that in appropriate, attuned ways.
Mhm.
And the same goes for once things get physical, like slow it way the F down,
Mhm.
and it's also funny because the older we get, it's almost like sometimes it can be just, oh, I can just have more of this thing that feels pleasurable on some level. But actually that patterning creates a deeper capacity to not listen to some signals that might be arising in the process of trying to kind of get to something with somebody for some agenda that you haven't even been conscious of.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm just really a big fan of taking it slow
Mhm.
in both the process of dating and the process of getting physical with somebody. So if there's anything as a general principle, I would say it's
Yeah.
that,
Mhm.
is to go slow and listen and trust yourself when you go slow. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. I can feel it, I can feel how you would guide people just very mindfully and very slowly, and, sort of really help to get inside of the pattern in a new way. Um,
Yeah.
so I,
Yeah. And
oh,
okay, just one last thing that I
yeah.
think I don't remember where I heard this. I think maybe a lot of dating people say this, but it's like often what I'll ask people is if they're like, well, what should I do? I'm like, I'm on Tinder, I'm on Bumble or whatever, and I'm going on dates. I'm like, well, just settle into yourself and imagine this person you're wanting to draw into your life. Like, what are they doing? Like, are they on Tinder or Bumble? Are they doing something else to
Like,
become the kind of person that would attract you? you know and I think that's just like, again, I don't pretend to know the answer, but I think like they know their own kind of avatar for who they want to manifest, and it's like maybe it's somebody who's just like living their purpose and asking their friends, hey, do you know any amazing women? I'm
yeah,
really interested in
yeah.
meeting someone awesome.
Yeah.
you know
Well, again, what I love about this, and then we're gonna have to hop off, so I want
hmm
to give you a chance to
Wrap it up.
wrap it up. But what I
Sure.
love about that is that, one, it feels really embodied, and it feels like instead of there being like this kind of like I feel like a lot of even like dating advice or relationship coaches, or there can be a sense of like a sort of almost like outward sourcing, like, oh, well, try this and try this. And what I love about what you're saying is it's like there's a real sense of coming back into self, into the body, into our own knowing. Even that question, I mean, that leads me there, right? It's like,
hmm
well, oh, like what, sort of in an embodied way, where do I think, let's say like a future partner would be, or,
Mm-hmm.
what feels right in my system. So it feels like you're guiding people back to themselves, which I really
Right.
appreciate. Yeah. So before we end, I'd love, maybe we'll do a part two. This seems to be
Uh-huh.
coming up lately in my shows.
Okay. Sure.
There's always more to say. Um,
Yeah.
but I'd love for people to know how to find you. Mm-hmm.
Great. Yeah. So people can find me. My website is evolveinlovecoaching.com. So evolve in love coaching. So just
Yep.
all together.com. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/evolveinlove or evolve in love coaching. I think it's just evolve in love. And then on Instagram as well as evolve in love, though I'm just getting the hang of that.
Yeah.
So bear with me with that one. And yeah, if you can also find me on Facebook just as Tall Rachleff. I'm the only Tall Rachleff that I believe exists on this planet. So I'm easy to find if you type in my name.
Well, and you work with, if I'm understanding correctly, you work with individuals, couples, and groups. So anyone who's
Right.
interested in your work, in any of those capacities can reach out to you. And it sounds like you both are doing the conscious coupling work and the unconscious,
Right.
unconscious work.
Right. We want to consciously uncouple and consciously couple. So we're just trying to remove all the unconsciousness
Yeah. Well, I
as
love
much as
that one.
possible.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a really
Yeah.
cool conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much. It's been really sweet to
Yeah.
connect and share. And I hope this serves whoever's listening. Thanks
Yes.
for listening to the end. And if you have any questions, please feel free to, I don't know if there's like a place to add comments or questions, but I'd love to answer any questions that people might
Sure.
have.
Yeah, that's great. If somebody watches and they want to, comment below, that's great, and Tal will respond.
Yeah.
And once again, my name is Lori Beth, and this show happens weekly. And I also have a program that is ongoing that's happening, which is called Dark Feminine Alchemy. And I am working with women doing, this is basically for women who want to transform their darkness and their pain and their trauma into their pleasure, beauty, and purpose. And really, I offer a 4-month container that's high touch one-on-one, and we are doing deep somatic and trauma work, as well as using all different kinds of practices to get more into your body and to rewire your nervous system. I have a very specific process that I use. It's different with each person, but to really get you to really be able to rewire the nervous system towards a lot more pleasure and happiness, basically, we could say. But the whole process it's not about getting rid of, it's actually about, harnessing everything that we go through as humans and shifting that. And I love working with women who have been on this path for a really long time and they continue to struggle and sort of even can feel hopeless or like there's no way out. That's actually one of my favorite groups of people to work with because that was my journey, and that's what I'm good at helping women with. So if you want to reach out to me, you can obviously find me on my page, Lori Beth, on Facebook. And I look forward to seeing you next week on the show. Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right. Thanks so
Paul.
much. All
Yeah.
right.